Okay, so first of all, I think I'd better apologise for the lack of content recently. Of course, Christmas is a rather busy time for everyone, and I would have hoped to get back to making these a little sooner than I did, but alas, here we are. But I will start again from now, and hopefully I'll be able to make things a little bit more regular from here on in, at least for the time being until university starts up again. So I'll try and cram in as much as possible before then. So I had a request a while ago to do the top 10 bodyguards, and this was one that, well, again, this is going to be a top 10 in name, but there are 9. I could have had 10 units on the list, but I decided to remove the Nazgul because the Nazgul will fit better onto another category of special units, which are like their own thing, which I will probably go over. That probably won't be a top 10 though because of how different they are from one another. I'll just go through them individually one by one. And the Nazgul fit better into that category because of their extremely high stats and their high hit point level. And the way they're used is somewhat different to pretty much any other unit. They're rather unique in how they can be used effectively. So there are only 9 units on this list, but they are all pretty decent. It makes for a pretty decent list, although they are different types of units as well. Like there are heavy cavalry units, heavy infantry units, archer. Well, there is an archer unit on there as well. So it's been pretty difficult to sort of make this list because it wasn't like before where I could set them against one another and the one with the better stats and the better performance would win out in the end. And it's been a little bit more tricky to sort of figure out how I would go about doing this list. But I have made a list based on what I've noticed in the past in actual battles, and I've done a few tests as well to see how effective these units are within their own categories, and also what I think is the most useful to each faction. So, for example, the top units will be there mainly because they actually add something meaningful to their faction. The problem with a lot of the general bodyguard units is they're just basically the same as another unit, only they have less men in the unit, which means you're not really going to be using them if you can help it. For example, the Eldarinwe Nobles of the High Elves, there's no real reason to use them over the Lancers because there are more of the Lancers, which means the charge is better, and the stats are basically the same. I think that they should have done it like Medieval 2, where the General's bodyguard units have 2 hit points. That would have evened the playing field out a little bit and make you have a reason to actually use the General's bodyguards. But alas, here we are. So I will start off at number 9, and I'll talk through why I've placed each unit where I've placed them. So at number 9, we have a unit which is shared between 2 factions, the Orcs of Gondor and the Misty Mountains Orcs, and that is the Orc Bodyguards. In terms of stats, they're actually pretty decent for an Orc unit. They have 9 attacks, 16 defense, and 4 charge. It's a very high defense in particular, which is good for a bodyguard unit. They have excellent morale, they have good armor, and they have good stamina. They do actually add a decent amount to the Orc factions that they're in as well, mainly because they are slightly better than the heavy infantry equivalents that they have, particularly for Gondor with the Orc Marauders. These guys are better. However, there are only 76 of them, which does count against them in the long run because their stats aren't high enough to justify losing that many Orcs per unit. Chances are you will be using one of these guys just to cut down a little bit on your costs with regards to your main Orc infantry, and these guys are pretty good at dealing with an enemy charge because of their higher defense. So you will probably be using them, but they aren't amazing just because of how few of them there are. That is a sentiment I'm going to be sharing in pretty much all of these, because with every single one of these units there's going to be an equivalent that just has more in the unit. Nonetheless, not a bad unit. They are reasonable to use in the center of your army just to give you that slightly more elite feel into the center and protecting your general here. But yeah, not a bad unit, but ultimately they had to come last just because all of the ones that are ahead of them are statistically far better than they are. So at number 8, it's a rather lackluster position for a Dwarven unit, it must be said. We have the Dwarf Nobleman, and there are a couple of reasons why they're down this low. It's not their stats, because their stats are actually very, very good. They have 7 attack, 21 defense, and 4 charge, so they're a much better version of the Orc Bodyguards. Less attack, there is a reason for that, and that is because they are good versus armor. They can form shield wall, just like all of the high tier Dwarven units. I can also rally the troops with my generals there. And they are also have very good armor, morale, and stamina. So they are essentially just like the Dwarven units that are the high tier infantry, which all of them I sang the praises of them. Problem is, there are less of these guys, and also there's not a lot of reason to use them either, because they are basically statistically almost identical to the Dragon Slayers. The Dragon Slayers have got one more attack and one less defense. I think they also have one more charge. And there really isn't much reason to use the Dwarven Nobleman unless it's to save a little bit of money, but because of the variety of the Dwarven Heavy Infantry anyway, chances are you're not going to really be able to afford to use this unit, because they are still pretty damn expensive. They're a high tier infantry unit after all. And also it's probably much more prudent to get yourself some Axemen of Erebor or something with very high attack so that you can actually dish out some damage a little bit more quickly, because the dwarves are more focused around defense anyway. You can still use them. They are still a very, very good unit, of course, especially if you combine them with all the Dragon Slayers, the Iron Guard, and the Guards of Khazad-dûm. But the Guards of Khazad-dûm is where you're more likely to see a Dwarven General, because there are more of them and they are statistically superior to the Dwarven Noblemen. So if you can help it, the Guards of Khazad-dûm are the way to go. But the Dwarven Noblemen still a very, very good unit, but for the purposes of this video, I had to say that because of the overall usefulness to the faction, I had to dock them some places for that. So they are down here in 8th. It is also worth saying the majority of the units ahead of them are cavalry units, which I think, with one very big exception, is the place where your general should probably be, if at all possible, so that he has some mobility and can escape some hairy situations. Whereas the dwarves, very slow traditionally. The general, once he's in combat, you're going to have to leave him there and hope he survives. But yeah, that's really all there is to say about the Dwarven Noblemen. They suffer from losing men more keenly than most, I would say, when compared to their Dwarven brethren. So we shall move on to number 7 and the start of the Cavalry Generals. So coming in at number 7, we have the Rohan bodyguards, and these guys are essentially a variant of the Royal Guard with less in them. Their stats are as follows. They have 7 attack, 15 defense and 9 charge. Now the 9 charge is of course very important because that's what shock cavalry is all about, but you've got to be careful with your general, because with so few men in the unit they are liable to be shot to bits by arrows, which is a little bit unfortunate. They have excellent morale, they have a powerful charge of course with that 9 charge bonus. They have good armor and good stamina, so there's nothing really stand out about them, and their stats are slightly worse than most of the cavalry units that come ahead of them in most cases. So yeah, really that's all that there is to say about them. They are a variant of the Royal Guard with less in them. You're going to be using the Mounted Royal Guard ahead of these guys most of the time. And the thing about Rohan is, they're generally going to have enough money to field more Royal Guard, so you're not really going to be needing to save money at all by using a bodyguard unit. Which is, again, part of why they're down here in 7th behind all of the other cavalry generals. Rohan's cavalry overall is very, very good, some of the best. But this unit is not really contributing to that. It's mainly the Mounted Royal Guard, of which these guys are just a stripped out version for the general. They would have much more of a place again if they had 2 hit points, just like the general's bodyguard units in Medieval 2, but as it is, this is their fate to reside in 7th. And now we shall move on to number 6, and you'll see this story repeated quite a lot as we go through these cavalry units. So in number 6, and we have another, perhaps the most cavalry heavy faction in the game, placing pretty low for their cavalry general, and that is Arnor's bodyguard unit. Again, it's a pretty similar story here. They have 7 attack, 17 defense, and 8 charge. They have less charge, but their stats overall are a little bit better. They have excellent morale, they have a powerful charge as well, and they have good armor and stamina. And they are also pretty expensive, and again, the reason why they're down this low is mainly because why would you not put your general in a Knights of the Numenorians unit, or even an Arnor Knights unit? You know, these guys are not as good as either of those units because there are so few of them. They are still pretty good at defending the general, of course, with their high defense score. That's how the bodyguards generally work. But they don't really have a place when you put them next to the other Arnor cavalry, and there's no real reason to use them. You will see them, of course, in things like custom scenarios and in the campaign. But again, you know, I would suggest that when you have something like the Knights of the Numenorians, why would you put your general in a bodyguard unit like this? I'm not sure. You know, it's kind of a weird one. It was kind of a strange design choice. I wonder if this is... I'm not sure if it could have been intentional, because it does make most of the bodyguard units kind of defunct, but nonetheless, they are still a good cavalry unit when compared to a lot of others. They will still do a lot of damage against a lot of the Orc factions in particular. But again, you know, a low amount of men in the unit, you've got to be very, very careful with your general when charging him in if you're going to use a bodyguard unit. And yeah, Arnor down this low on a list is that they should be dominating is not really something you see all that often with the other cavalry units they have. Nonetheless, we shall move on to number 5, I believe. So, at number 5, we have Gondor's General's Bodyguard. Now, in terms of stats here, we are looking at 7 attack, 17 defense, and 9 charge. That's the same as the Arnor one, but with 1 more charge. And they also have the same attributes as well, with excellent morale, a powerful charge, good armor, and good stamina. Again, it's a similar story here, like Swan Knights are far superior, although Gondor's cavalry is not quite as packed as Arnor, so there is perhaps more of a reason to use the Gondor's General Bodyguard. They are also, in terms of stats, slightly better as well. Nice looking general armor there. But yeah, it's a similar story here as well, really. You've got a very small unit with pretty good stats, but ultimately it's not going to be any good when you put them up against a volley of arrows because there are so few of them. You're not going to want to lose your general so badly. And with cavalry, particularly with Gondor and how good their Swan Knights are, you're going to want to be aggressive. You're going to want to take the fight to the enemy and then bring up your spears and your pole arms behind them to really reinforce your position and make you dominate the cav fights. These guys, you're not going to want to be aggressive with them, and that's the whole problem behind most of the general's bodyguards, to be honest with you. Still, not a bad unit, but just not terribly practical to use if you're going to be playing a straight up 1v1 online with equal funds. I would suggest your funds are much better placed on either Gondor Cavalry or Swan Knights if you want to really go cav heavy. So yeah, that is the Gondor General's Bodyguard, and now we shall move on to number 4. Yes, the 4th in the list. So at number 4 we have Eriador's Dunedain Bodyguards. Now, these guys actually have slightly less in the unit, but it's less of a problem here because all of the units have got very low numbers. So, unlike with the battle-ready Dunedain, it's a little bit less of a problem for the bodyguards to have a few less men in the unit. And also their stats are pretty damn good. 8 attacks, 17 defense, and 9 charge. Again, that's slightly better than the Gondor General's Bodyguard. They have excellent morale, a powerful charge, good stamina, and etc. Arrows are really the main problem with these guys. That's true of all the General's Bodyguards again. And again, it's the same sort of problem. Again, one thing that I have also taken into account is cost efficiency of the faction as a whole and the necessity of using a bodyguard unit to mitigate the costs. Eriador won't really need to do this because they are, again, like Rohan, they will probably not be spending as much on their infantry, so they're going to want to go all in on their cavalry. So you're going to want Grey Company, you're going to want battle-ready Dunedain. You're not really going to be using these guys if you can help it, but they're not bad compared to quite a lot of the other sort of lighter cavalry. They're going to win out in... Their charge is also very, very good, but again, I would not see the point of using these guys over battle-ready Dunedain. Or the Grey Company, for that matter. Having your general in a Grey Company unit is not a bad idea either, simply because of how fast they are. Depends on how confident you are in your micro. But again, I would say that these guys suffer the same problem as all of the General's Bodyguard. It's starting to sound like a broken record here, but that is true of these guys as well. But again, mitigating the cost is something that with perhaps Arnor you would want to do, but their bodyguard unit is so expensive that it doesn't really make sense to do it there either. Gondor's General Bodyguard may be slightly more understandable because their bodyguard is a little bit more affordable, but I would still say the Gondor Cavalry is the way to go there. But yeah, that is the Dunedain Bodyguard, and now we shall move into the top 3, and this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. Well, I'd say the top 2 is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting, but we'll move on to 3rd. So at number 3 we have the Eldarinwe Nobles, and what puts these guys ahead of the Dunedain Bodyguard are their stats, for one. They have 8 attack, 18 defense, and 9 charge. That means they have slightly more defense, which is very, very important. And also, excellent morale, powerful charge, good stamina, but most importantly, very good armor, which means where the Dunedain Bodyguards have a very real weakness to arrows, these guys very much less so. And also they offer the same level of deadly charging, and also they look fantastic. The Eldarinwe Nobles are an excellent looking unit. The Elven units in general all look pretty damn good, but these guys, must be said, I really like the silver armor that they have and their capes. Very, very nice looking unit. Again, they do suffer from the fact that, why would you not use the Eldarinwe Lancers instead? The only thing is about the elves, you're not really going to be fielding a huge cavalry force anyway. Like 1 Eldarinwe Noble and 3 Lancers is very, very expensive. You're going to be compromising your infantry probably a little bit too much there. And, you know, therein lies the problem. Like, when are these guys going to be useful in an elven army composition that isn't sort of a custom scenario that's been set up for you? I'm not seeing it, to be honest with you. It's not easy to see where it comes from. They are better than the other cavalry generals bodyguard units, with the exception of 1. But, yeah, only 26 of them as well. Like, I would say that the Lancers are very much the superior choice, but the Eldarinwe Nobles do have a lot of merit to them when comparing them to the lower generals bodyguards on this list in particular. But now we shall move on to the top 2, and the top 2 are units we have actually already seen before on other lists, so it'll be pretty easy to talk about them, I think. So at number 2 we have the Black Numenorians. These guys made it onto the top 10 heavy cavalry list, and they make it onto this list as well because I think they do fit the mold of a general's bodyguard unit. The Nazgul do too, technically, but I was going to put them on a special units list, which I'm going to do because they fit that even better, I think. And the Black Numenorian stats are as follows. They have 11 attack, 18 defense, and 6 charge, which, it's not overly better than anything we've seen so far. They cause fear, very good morale and stamina, and good armor. Really, though, the thing that really puts them up this high on the list, in my opinion, is the fact that they have characteristics of heavy infantry and cavalry, in the sense that they're kind of a strange unit. They will perform very well in sustained melee, I have noticed. And also the fear is very nice if you recharge them while they're being a recharged unit while it's being hammered on by trolls or a mass of orcs. They're probably going to break unless they're a very, very elite unit indeed. All round a very good unit. Also, it's worth mentioning they have a few more men per unit than most others, and in sustained melee they are going to do very, very well for themselves unless they are mobbed by cavalry. And that's why I think they are very good at defending the general. They offer all the mobility of cavalry with quite a lot of survivability of heavy infantry. I do hope to see the dismounted Black Numenorians in Reforged again because I really like that unit in Moss, but here, the mounted Black Numenorians, certainly a very, very good general's bodyguard for Mordor and a very practical unit to use. Unlike the ones previously on the list, the Black Numenorians are a unit you're likely to see a lot more often in a 1v1 online that you play, as opposed to a lot of the other general's bodyguard units, which are generally not as powerful as some of their counterparts. But Mordor, the Black Numenorians, don't really have a counterpart, and they are very, very strong and very good at what they do, which is why they are second. But there is one unit, I believe, which performs the function of being a general's bodyguard and being a general asset to the faction a little bit better than the Black Numenorians, and we shall get right onto them right now. And so at number 1 we have the Sindar Archers, the Sylvan Elves getting a bit of love again. And indeed, why not? Because they are an excellent archer unit. 12 attack, 15 defense, and 7 charge means in melee they're no slouches either, but the 13 missile damage makes them, in terms of individual missile damage, the strongest archer unit in the game. Of course, the archer list that I've done before shows why I think they aren't overall the best archer unit in the game, and it does have to do with that old general's bodyguard weakness of having fewer men in the unit. They have excellent morale, they're well armoured, and they have very good stamina, so they can keep up the barrage for longer than most other units. Really what makes these guys so good, in my opinion, is how well they slot into their faction. You're never going to be able to have like 4 Sylvan heavy archers, no matter how much funds you have. It's just never really practical to have that many. So having a Sindar archer unit is almost required, and they are dead-eye accurate. They are excellent units. When you put them into a bunch of Sylvan heavy archers, the archer forces of other factions just can't hope to compete with the Sylvan Elves, really. Like, the High Elves come pretty close. Dale try their best, but ultimately these guys are the kings when it comes to ranged combat and skirmishing. And the Sindar Archers are a very big part of that. They will defend the general pretty well in melee, but really it's how well they benefit the faction. You're going to be needing to use these guys if you want to field your best archer force, and your archer force is the key to victory pretty much every time you play as the Sylvan Elves, because you're going to be outnumbered in the melee fight, so you're going to need to equalise that somehow. And archers are, of course, the best way of doing this. Very nice looking unit as well, the blue capes, the Sylvan armour, all very, very nice indeed. So yeah, the Sindar Archers win the top spot on my top 9 General's Bodyguard units. As for the next top 10, I'm not sure if there's enough light cavalry, and I'm also not sure if there is enough pike halberd units to do. If I combine the pikes and the halberds, there is of course enough for a top 10. But I don't think it's fair to actually put the pikes and the halberds in the same list, because functionally they do perform pretty differently in different situations. So it's not really practical to put them on the same list. And if you have just pikes and just halberds, that's nowhere near enough for a top 10. So I'm going to have to think about this for the next top 10. If I can't actually do another top 10 with enough meat on the bones for at least 9 in a list, then I think I'll just do a special unit list where I talk through all of the weird and wonderful units like the Mumakil and Sauron, and even the Balrog if the game doesn't crash on loading when I try and showcase what he does. But we'll see. I'll also keep doing the Moss Changes videos. I'm coming to the end of those as well, actually. So pretty soon I'm going to have limited content with which I can do things on my own. As I know that some people have asked me to do a campaign, but that's a very elongated thing. And I don't know, if I come to the end of doing what I can with regards to top 10s and faction overviews until Reforged comes out, and I find myself at a loss of what to post, then I may very well start a campaign in Third Age. But again, you know, chances are by the time I'm done with all this, Reforged will be just around the corner and I can start this again. And we can do some custom scenarios in Reforged as well, which sounds very fun indeed. So that's the plan for the immediate future. I will keep doing what I've been doing until I run out, and then, depending on when Reforged comes out, I'll think of something to do. But I hope you enjoyed this list, and I hope to see you for the next video.